What's going on, everyone? We're back with the Unqualified Film Bros podcast to talk about Morbius again. Whatever. What movie are we talking about tonight?
Uh,
We're
trying
not
to think.
talking about.
Spider-Man?
Yeah, that must be it. Yeah, we're talking about the only multiverse movie that everyone's going to be talking about this spring.
Nice, well done.
Thank you.
See what you did there?
I thought about that joke literally all afternoon after I saw the movie.
Do you practice it in the mirror too?
No, a little bit.
It was well done.
Everything, everywhere, all at once.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, this is a Daniels film, two directors named Daniel, produced by the Russo brothers, Joe and Anthony AGBO Films. This one was a trip. What'd you guys think of this?
I feel like it was very good. I will say, best movie of all time according to Letterboxd. I unfortunately couldn't get that on that level of appreciation for it. It is a great film, but yeah, it wasn't literally the best movie.
I just want to point out right now, Ben is coming in hot. He just walked out of the theater from seeing this as we're starting the recording.
Ben is actually
Benji,
still
what do you got
in
on
the
this?
theater.
Yeah, I'm actually like in another universe. I'm still watching.
You verse jumped to a universe where you're interesting.
What weird thing did you have to do to verse jump?
I ate part of the movie theater seat.
That would do it. It's a good
That
one.
would definitely do it.
That would definitely do it.
Yeah, that was one of the weirdest parts of the movie. Is you got to do something just absolutely unexpected and bonkers to get the effect that you want.
I feel like they should have had at least. I wish they could have had at least one more like explanation for why you had to do something, or like I don't even know. It's great, but it's also like so strange how it's like, oh, we just got to do weird. Like, even the characters are like, oh, just do something weird.
So I agree, Declan. Like, we give you a lot of shit for exposition on this podcast, but this is one instance where I might.
We haven't done that in a while.
No, where I think I actually kind of agree. Maybe a little bit more explanation, or at least throw in some like not weird things.
Mm-hmm.
Like you take a right in the hallway instead of a left. You know.
Yeah.
Well, that was the first one. Was go to the janitor's closet or go to the audit meeting.
Yeah, I know, but like
take a left, take a right.
It wasn't, I think, have one more sort of as things had gotten explained, because at that point I didn't really know what was going on.
Yeah, I think what works best about this movie is that, you know, it doesn't assume the audience knows too much about its concept, in that you get the fish out of water sense with Evelyn diving into these worlds and universes, but you also use that fish out of water experience as a way of having like Alpha Waymond giving you the exposition you need by telling her. And yeah, it's a way of telling the audience, but it's done in a really organic way through the plot of the movie. And I think that's one of my favorite filmmaking aspects and storytelling aspects of this movie, is that none of the premise is shoved down the audience's throat. It's we're going along for the ride the whole time.
Yeah. I feel like it's like, I think like the one thing I will say as a negative, and it's in a way it's what it is I'm complaining about an embarrassment of riches. I feel like I am going to need a second rewatch of this film to like fully appreciate it, because there is just so much like plot that like so much to sift through, and it's good. It's really good, but it's like trying to keep it all together. I feel like by the end of it, there was a tiny bit of like I don't know what's going on anymore. Not
a little bit.
But,
I wrote this in my Letterboxd review. but it kind of in the third act, and it divides into three parts that aren't even, every part one, everything is the first probably 60% of the movie. And then everywhere is part two, everywhere is the next, say, 30%. And then all at once is the epilogue, basically. But I think what happens in the third act of this film is it delves a little bit too far into its own concept. And you get so many, stories in different universes happening at the same time. And Evelyn's going from universe to universe to universe, but you're not exactly seeing her make the move, make the jump from each one. So it's a little bit, all right, which one is the one we're like really following, which is an alternate one. So that took me out of it a little bit in the third act, but I'm curious to hear what you guys thought of the big climax and resolution of this story.
I just wanted to say a few things first.
Yeah, Ben, this was your suggestion. You should be talking.
I was waiting to chime in. But yeah, I mean, the movie is a bit times like random, and I think you're supposed to get overloaded essentially. But I think that fits with the movie, which is the plot is essentially life is crazy and random, and you never know what you're going to get. But I think the movie does a great job showing that what matters is the relationships. Which universe it is sort of irrelevant. The whole composite is like the relationships in total. So they're all, I think, supposed to be, one version of Evelyn, and finding ways to make love instead of war, as we say. But I think a lot of it is supposed to be a little ridiculous. But I think
the hot dog fingers.
Yeah, I think, like they say in the movie, there's only a few moments that really make sense in all of this, and I think that is sort of the mantra for the film, which is a lot of the stuff doesn't need to make sense. It's irrelevant. It's just a vehicle to like show relationships in a different creative manner. It doesn't take itself, science fiction wise too seriously. Like in the last act, I love that the father's like suit of armor is like made out of old, computer parts from the 2000s that you'd find on like a cheap Dell. It really doesn't take itself too seriously, and I think it's to its positives, because if it did delve too much into that, it would bog down the message of the film.
True. I feel like on some level, not some level, I feel like the everything bagel itself is like, I feel like that is another thing I'm gonna have to like figure out more on rewatch, because I feel like that was like,
yeah, let's talk it out.
Yeah, like that was something like I feel like it's trying to be is that like her entering, her daughter entering the everything bagel is like proof that like everything is meaningless.
It's nihilism.
Nihilism, all that. And Evelyn rejecting it is showing like the importance of our individual relationships and how one thing that can stay is the relationships we have with one another, I think. Right? Is that right? Like, do you guys feel that way as well?
I'm not really sure what the everything bagel is, but like my previous point, I'm not entirely
poppy
sure
seeds and stress. What did you not get about it?
I don't know that there's a like deep point to the bagel. She obsesses over it, like wondering if she can die or whatever. But I just don't think that it matters in the end. I think it's just like an object of some sort of like, filling the void that like she feels with her mother. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the void.
It also
in a bagel.
It also visually serves as a great foil for the googly eyes that Wayman puts on everything and that Evelyn puts in the middle of her forehead at the end of the film. You got this dark abyss with a light center, and then the googly eyes are obviously white background and then black center for a pupil, an eyeball, whatever. I picked up on that the second I saw the bagel for the first time. I was like, oh wow, it's basically saying that, Wayman's approach, which is how Evelyn eventually wins in the end, I guess you could say, is by helping people through how Wayman would want her to help. And I think that his compassion and almost silliness in some sense is a great, almost opposite approach to existence, to what joy has in the form of the bagel of infinite nothingness.
Yeah. Speaking of Wayman, I think I'll agree.
Ke-Huy Quan is going to win the Oscar.
He better win the Oscar. Ke-Huy Quan for Oscar, best supporting actor. This is my Ariana DeBose prediction.
I am calling that shot right now. Ke-Huy Quan is going to win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. And when we do Oscar predictions in January or February of next year, I'm going to find this clip in the files and cut it in to that video. Stay tuned for that.
Well done.
But yeah, I mean, he is just tremendous, playing so many different versions of the same character, which, a lot of people do in this film. But, you got the geeky, like nerdy, awkward, bumbling husband who wants divorce. And then you've got, the badass action hero, Alpha Waymond. And you've got the suave, this is my life as a success because we didn't get married, Waymond. And he's just the fact that he came back to making movies after such a long hiatus to deliver this performance. I mean, it's outstanding.
Yeah. I feel like his monologue, oddly enough, I feel like almost brought me to tears or something like that. Like the when he's like talking about like why he is how he is. I was like just for some reason just felt like moved by it.
Yeah, I think that the editing was really good in this movie too. It really cemented a lot of the emotional impact from a lot of scenes. And yeah, I think he was fantastic. And I think the different Waymans is like a big part of the movie. Obviously, the other part being Joy, and her father. But like the alpha Wayman who comes in, kicks ass, can beat everybody up. I guess
with a fanny pack.
With a fanny pack, he's
the
like
coolest guy ever
Wayman.
To wield a fanny pack.
That's what you wanted, Wayman to be. I guess that's what I think is the point. This guy who's not like nerdy and not weak. They sort of touch on that later in the film. But he leaves as soon as like she falters or whatever. And in every single universe where Wayman is like similar. There's like 2 laundromat universes. I couldn't really figure that one out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
one of them was the original one from the beginning of the film.
Yeah, but he was always, helping her out. And I think that sort of shows like just the value of relationships that in this movie compared to like everything else, especially when he's saying like he would trade everything just to, do laundry with her and do taxes.
Yeah,
I thought that was a really sweet part of the movie.
That cut deep, yeah. And Max, you texted me something earlier, right after I got out of the movie, talking about the themes of relationships. You want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah. So I texted George about the really powerful message centering around intergenerational trauma, and sort of the journey that Michelle Yeoh's character went through throughout the entire film, from obviously the very beginning, having an incredibly strained relationship with her daughter Joy, but having a seemingly pretty solid relationship with her father, but then that kind of unraveling as the movie went along, and eventually devolving into her fighting her father more than fighting Joy. She and eventually ending with her letting Joy go into I guess at that point it was Jobu Tabaki, into the bagel, and then reconnecting in one of the laundromat universes. I think that was probably the original one. But I just thought that was really powerful, because I know that this was a deeply personal film for Michelle Yeoh, and I know, you can hear about it from your Asian friends, and friends that have parents that are overbearing, that this is exactly what it's like. That this is the kind of stuff that they live, this is the kind of stuff that they go through and haven't been able to deal with. And so this was very personal for Michelle Yeoh, and you can see it in any of the interviews that she gives on the press junket for this film. She gets choked up and emotional at times, because it means that much to her that she's been able to tell this story. And it doesn't matter how she was able to tell it, it just matters that she was able to, because that can lift a lot of the weight off of someone's shoulders. And I think it could be a cathartic experience for someone to go into the theater and see something like this. Like, this is big.
Yeah, and to give the performance that she gives across universes, for one thing, but also being able to, obviously she's best known for her action work decades ago, but just to be able to weave together heart and humor and thrills and action and science fiction and horror in very few senses, but there are some moments that fit that bill. This film genre jumps a lot, but her character is able to put it all together in such a way that you can tell how much she is bringing to this film as an actor. And I respect the hell out of her for what she brings to the table in a leading role, in one of her best leading roles that I've seen.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Honestly, it's like I didn't know. I gotta read some of her interviews. I mean, sounds like I didn't know that. That's so interesting that the film was so personal to her. I gotta be
honest. A lot of what she said is it mirrors her character, in that she was just looking, and Joy's character as well, that they were all looking for parental approval, and not the approval where it's like, you see this at the end of the film. It's not, I will allow you to do whatever you want, I'm gonna be happy with no, I'm gonna give you tough love when I need to, but you know that I love you. You know that I still will come back at the end of the day. We're gonna come back to each other. Even if you drive me absolutely bananas, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna love you at the end of the day.
Yeah, a lot of strong tones of family in this one.
Yeah.
Whether it's, James Hong's character, or the characters of Joy, Wayman, Evelyn. I want to talk really quickly about someone who isn't in the family but plays a huge role, and that is Deirdre Babeirdre, which is the actual name of Jamie Lee Curtis's character. Babirdra. It's not mentioned in the movie. It's in the credits, and it's in like all the descriptions, Letterboxd, IMDb, Wikipedia, all of that. But I feel like Jamie Lee Curtis must be so much fun to have on set in any movie. Whether it's this, whether it's the Scream movies, whether it's Knives Out. She just feels like she goes along with the premise and has so much fun with each movie she does. And then in this movie, to again bring together so many different sides of so many different versions of one character, it's just, she was one of my favorite parts in the movie just because she was so into what she was doing and committed so hard to everything she did.
She was both like comical, lovable, and like terrifying.
Yeah. She had that Vincent D'Onofrio in Men in Black type walk at one point earlier in the film.
Yeah.
Like she's possessed.
Yeah.
It was so interesting how the sheer amount of stuff she had to do in the film was like so out there. The fact that she was all down for it is fantastic. Having to be both like just completely mundane person and also at times intimidating threat who's fighting the hero. That's a really interesting performance.
Well, there was also the universe where she and Evelyn were romantically involved. That's the Hot Dog Hands universe. By the way, if you stayed to the end of the credits, if you stayed to the end of the end credits, it said one of the production companies was a copyright 2021 Hot Dog Hands Productions. Probably just an in joke with the team behind it, but
I can imagine
that was one of the zaniest parts of the movie was that universe, but it also showed another side of these two characters. And it really, it was a good, like, it almost felt like a romantic drama universe compared with the action thriller and the black comedy.
Yeah, but I just want to touch on like that, it sort of goes back to the relationships again, even like the ridiculous nature of Hot Dog Hands or them being rocks. Like they're still able to convey that sense of love to each other.
The Rocks was awesome in that
oh my
sense.
gosh,
The Rocks was great.
So creative from a
that was
filmmaking standpoint.
Oh my word.
Like the fact that they managed to like convey a conversation solely through text was masterful,
Yeah.
And it was an emotional conversation.
It made sense too. Yeah.
100%. Like it almost like when you think about it, it's like it's just text on the screen, but for some reason, it's a fully emotional.
It hits
scene.
hard.
Part of that, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you disagree, but a lot of that I think has to do with the way that we interpret stuff and read things through text instead of hearing it, because we put our own emotion onto it. We put our own inflection onto the words. And I think, that obviously will mean something within the broader context of the movie, the text and the words on the screen and the rocks. But I think people can attach more to it where they see fit and take away something where maybe it doesn't resonate with them as much. It happened at the right moment, and sort of right after that was when the entire theater kind of just devolved into tears and quiet sniffles, which you could hear throughout the theater because it was like dead silent.
Well, speaking of when theaters went dead silent,
oh God.
How about the fake ending?
Someone actually got up
for the movie in the she's a kung fu master actress universe.
Someone
fake ending. It
legitimately
said the end.
Someone
started rolling
up.
fake
I
credits.
swear to God, somebody got up and almost walked. I heard rustling behind me. I don't know who it was, but I heard them like getting up to leave.
I was like, this movie is 2.25. It's been like $1.40 at most.
Like,
what is happening?
I gotta be honest. I feel like there was a part of me that, like, for some reason, one thing that I don't know if it's a critique per se, but I feel like this movie felt long, like compared to other ones. At least for me, I feel like it felt.
There were some pacing concerns, I think, just because there was so much going on, and it was, very, very high, high velocity the entire time. Tensions were high in every scene, whether it was, a fanny pack beatdown at an IRS office or 2 rocks on the side of the Grand Canyon. Emotions were high. The heart rates were also high. I think that this film was, I don't really want to say overstuffed, but it was filled to the brim with so much of its own concept.
Yeah.
That, pacing can become an issue at the, hour 45, 2-hour mark. But at the same time, when you're rolling along at that breakneck speed, you're kind of just along for the ride and you're going to see it through.
It was also building to something like way outside the realm of where it was obvious that where I thought it was obvious it was going at that point. Because by the hour 40 mark, sort of at the break of the first 2 acts or parts, it was just like so fast, and I didn't really know what the ending would be like, because there weren't really, it just raised more questions for me. I didn't really have any answers by the time it got to that point.
Yeah, I knew there was going to be more. No one in my theater got up.
Same.
Well, lucky you guys have smart people in this theater or something, I guess. I don't know.
Well,
I mean, it did go, to be fair, it did go on for a long time. Like,
it is.
The credits did start rolling. So
that was why I was bringing up it feeling long, is I meant to say, I feel like the fake ending almost felt like a devious trick, kind of like they were trying to fake out as many people as they possibly could while getting away with it by doing it in the middle of the movie. I feel like, again,
another trick too, which is it disorients you. Like, she gets killed, and then she sort of wakes up in this universe. So,
but that's still a powerful way to end the movie if they were to go that way and kill her off in that scene.
Oh, yeah,
that's one. That's,
we talk about how many decisions lead to different universes in this film. That's one filmmaking decision that could have ended this movie in a very different way than the one we got in the last 30 minutes.
Yeah, that would have not been a good ending.
It's a choice, is all I'm saying.
That's true. It is a choice. They could have ended it like at the hour mark, just stopped rolling.
No, they could have forgotten to shoot the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
And there wouldn't be a story,
I mean, imagine if what they did was they actually like had they arranged for the theater lights to come up too.
Oh my god.
Oh.
That would be cruel. That would
be a prank
cruel.
at that point.
Yeah.
It would have been worth it, but actively cruel. I hope they did that for the premiere.
If this movie came out 2 weeks ago, April Fool's Day.
Oh my gosh, did it actually?
Did it actually?
I mean, no, it came out at South by last month. So.
Okay, yeah. Still, I feel like it feels like
showings,
a good April Fool's Day movie. It kind of has that vibe. Now that
you think of, what you're saying.
Now that you bring that up, it's like this would be a good movie to watch if you're like want to watch a movie that like has wackiness and zaniness coming all around it.
I mean, March 25th, it came out like right before April Fool's, and probably when people were on spring break, so maybe they weren't able to get away for a movie as they were traveling and stuff. So that's a good thought, George. I like that.
Yeah, I had a great April Fool's prank. Just a quick little story here. I had a great April Fool's prank. relating to the ending of a movie. I was watching Casino Royale with my folks the other night, and and we've talked about Casino Royale on this pod, we all know how great it is. But when Bond and Vesper are sort of just epiloguing after the poker game ends and after Bond and Vesper are taken captive, I was like, yep, that's the end of the movie. They live happily ever after. The next 4 movies that Craig did are prequels. And they totally bit.
And that's fair. That part went on. It feels like the end of the movie. And then there's like 45 minutes left.
Mm-hmm. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Not that I'm complaining. It was great, but.
Okay,
but anyway, anecdote aside, do you guys think that Everything Everywhere All at Once is worth the hype? Does it live up to the hype?
I feel like it was a little unfair. I mean, the reason why I saw it was because of just how positive the reception for it was, you know, again, top rated film on Letterboxd. That's really interesting. That being said, I feel like no film could truly live up to that level of hype. And so for me, again, I still fully recommend it and still had a great time with it. But I feel like I can't quite say it lived up to the hype as it did for so many other people. For me, personally.
Just to tack on that, yeah, I mean, I'll agree to a certain point. Like, the hype was pretty big, I guess. Like, the top-rated films in all these categories. I don't know that it probably deserves to be there. It's probably, like, up there, though. But I mean, it's a very, very unique film. It perfectly, you know, meshes like comedy with drama, and a little romance, some kung fu in there, sci-fi, a little bit of horror, and it never feels out of place. I mean, I guess sort of because everything feels out of place, but it's somewhat like beautiful in a way, just to see the randomness, and like it's just a cinematic, you know, you just watch it. There aren't a lot of movies like that anymore. You just sort of observe some of the scenes. There's nothing to say about them. They look awesome, and
it's shot beautifully.
They feel like part of the plot, in a weird way. But yeah, I mean, it's just an awesome movie. So does it live up to the hype of being like the best movie ever? I guess not, but it's a very, very good movie.
Yeah.
I think Declan's Letterboxd review mentioned something about like, is it Parasite, Citizen Kane, or The Godfather? No. But, and then he went on. But yeah, I'll compare it to Parasite, because that's a movie that I saw months after it won the Best Picture Oscar, and you know, had that. I think it's still at like a 4.4, 4.5 on Letterboxd, which is again one of the highest rated films on the app, and obviously it's a critic darling, fans love it. But Parasite is another really intense black comedy thriller. And I sort of got the same sort of tone from this. I just feel like Parasite, which I will say I did enjoy Parasite more than I enjoyed this film, not by a lot. I just feel like Parasite went all the way with everything it wanted to do. And this film goes all the way with everything it wants to do. I just feel like that is a step lower than Parasite's setup and execution of its concept.
Parasite had like a arrow point like idea and execution that it like nailed perfectly. Everything Everywhere All at Once had a much wider target that it still mostly hit, you know, but it didn't have the just raw precision that Parasite had and all that. I get it's a little bit of comparing apples and oranges to an extent, so I shouldn't. Yeah. So it's like shouldn't be too much. But I think at least on my first viewing, that could be a reason why I prefer Parasite to this one. But both great films, and I do imagine rewatching it and being able to understand more of the story and themes. I imagine, yeah, I can't.
One of my favorite lines that I got from my dad about certain movies. We have differing opinions about what movies it applies to, but the line is too good to watch. And Parasite is one of those movies for me that it's just so thrilling. It's almost a perfectly made film, but it just gets my heart rate too high. Like I love it so much that it's one, you know, I should revisit. I'm going to revisit, but it's like it's an intense viewing experience, and Everything Everywhere is very intense as well. And I had the thought while I was watching the movie of, is this too good to watch? But then again, there are parts of the film that we've gone over that to answer my question from a few seconds ago, and Max, I want to hear your thoughts on this too, that I don't feel like it lives up to the hype. I think it's a fantastic film. I really, really enjoyed it. But like Ben just said, and like Declan just said, best movie of all time, it's not in the conversation. One of the best films of the century, there's a conversation to be had months and months from now, years and years from now. Best film of the year, I would say so far it's up there. So Max, does it live up to the hype? Yes or no? I went on too long.
Yes and no. I think obviously it doesn't live up to the literal hype that was built up by critics and, you know, other moviegoers saying it was the best of all time, because what film can actually live up to those expectations?
Lincoln.
Shut up.
that was really interesting what just happened right there.
Morbius.
Morbius. That's a good self-correction, George. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I love John Carter, by the way. And I'm so sorry for interrupting, Max.
No, Max. You're good. So yes and no, right? No, because of all that other stuff I said about it not being possible to live up to those expectations. But I think it does live up to the hype, and it surpasses some of the hype in another way. You know, my own, obviously, I was not very excited about going to see this until I started hearing about it and seeing Michelle Yeoh's interviews. And then I just got more and more excited, and I went in with a pretty open mind, I think. So surpassed my own hype and expectations. But I also think what it does is it elevates a way to tell a story that is so familiar to so many people, right? You know, my thing about this was intergenerational trauma. And I think in a lot of ways, that's not super accessible to the swath of the country and the world that have not experienced generational trauma in the same way that others have, or even at all. And I think this film does it in a way that makes it the central theme, but it doesn't shove it down your throat in a way that's pretentious or unnecessary. It just does it, right? You see conflict with parents and children. That's something that's pretty, I would say, is pretty universal, right? You're going to have disagreements with your parents and your loved ones. Going to get audited is very, like, there's so much that's normal that you can attach to. And I think that, for me at least, it made it easier for me to feel like I'm part of the film, and experience, and being able to more closely pay attention to the way that the characters interacted, because that's what the directors wanted you to do. And that's why I think that it's so important, is that it made difficult concepts like trauma and anxiety and depression, it brings it to the forefront without making it sort of a film about mental health. And I think that's really powerful, that it has many different underlying messages that you can just sort of pick from.
Yeah, I think just building on that, the film is so real in so many senses, but so fantastic in the terms of fantasy and science fiction, that it makes a lot of these underlying messages you're talking about, Max, it makes them accessible. It makes the movie accessible, where people can find those things like divorce, IRS audit, generational trauma. If it gives the audience an opportunity to latch on to something tangible and something real in a movie about the multiverse.
Yeah.
So,
And I think it reminded me in some ways a little bizarre. One's like a sort of dream, the other's like a nightmare. But Pan's Labyrinth is both, they're both sort of magical realism in a way. I mean, this is more like sci-fi, but they have it has an element to it, which is like a projection of your own trauma, you know, in different ways through like fantasy, essentially. And I think just going back to the point that Max said, like, I think it's really easy to feel like you're part of the movie because of the multiverse, right? Where like there's, you know, she's switching in and out, and even though it's the same people, it's different settings, and she's got, you know, different occupations and stuff, and the people she's with, like Raymond, or Waymond, yeah. Now,
I feel like
that doesn't sound right.
Like Deirdre called him Raymond. Like someone called him Raymond.
It was Deirdre. She did.
It was Deirdre. Okay.
Deirdre,
yeah.
Deirdre.
It's like Amelia Bedelia. You remember those books?
Yep.
That's
throwing way back.
where they got it from.
Yeah, the people are sort of interchangeable. The story is universal. There's nothing, like, you know, Max said, there's nothing super specific about it. And it's a lot more of a show, don't tell movie. I would compare that to Parasite. Like, they're two films and they're very different. I find them kind of hard to compare. I find it hard to compare a lot of films to this. But like Parasite and a lot of films like that, even though they are, you know, black comedies, they're a lot more grounded. And they are
a lot more grounded than this.
A lot more focused on like specific issues. Like obviously with that, it's, you know, Korean inequality. And it's kind of tough to just compare it, because I look at it as a lot more of a like an emotional experience, but it's a visual experience too. Compared to something like Parasite, which is a lot more specific with their specific family dynamics and stuff. It's a lot more focused on the dialogue, I'd say, less about like showing different scenes. It uses the dialogue a lot and the different, you know, occupations, like when he's driving people. So I just say, like, they're hard to compare when, you know, relating it to like best film of all time.
That's a fair assessment.
It's tough to compare.
So any more final thoughts, or has this last conversation sort of done the trick?
I'll just quickly say James Hong. I feel like he's like, you know, he's been around forever.
James Hong.
Fantastic in so many other films, and he's fucking fantastic here, you know. Like, God bless James Hong.
Yeah. When he shows up and he's sort of, you know, in a dilapidated state almost, I was like, oh, this is what they brought James Hong in for. And then the rest of the movie, he's all in on the action. So props to him for having one of the most legendary careers of any actor in movie history. So yeah, we want to know your thoughts on Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's still playing in movie theaters. It just premiered at South by Southwest last month. It's widespread in theaters now. Go see it. We recommend it.
Very much
but,
so. It is definitely a movie you have to watch.
Oh yes.
Yeah. It's a wild ride. Let us know what you think. But we will be back next week as we head to the Wizarding World.
Ooh.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.